Tahquamenon Falls State Park is Michigan's second largest state park with more than 48,000 acres of wildlands. The centerpiece of this park is the Tahquamenon River and its upper and lower falls. The upper falls is actually the second largest waterfall east of the Mississippi River based on volume. This waterfall tumbles 50 feet over 200-foot wide sandstone ledge. The lower falls is actually a series of 5 waterfalls that cascade around an island in the middle of the river. It is 17 miles from the lower falls to the river mouth and 4 miles from the lower falls to the upper falls. The park contains about 24 miles of the Tahquamenon River, which is about 94 miles in total length. In this video, we'll be talking about camping at Tahquamenon Falls and some of the activities we did during our visit. But first, let me tell you a little bit more about the park. In 1935, at the urging of local activists who wanted to see the falls protected, the Michigan Department of Conservation Commissioners visited the Tahquamenon Falls area. Their report stated that the area around Tahquamenon Falls was, quote, the most outstanding scenic and recreational area in Michigan today, serving as a lure that is drawing and will continue to draw an ever-increasing number of tourist visitors to northern Michigan. Efforts by the state to preserve this area started soon after, and in 1947, the state park was officially created. In 1949, the state park opened its first campground at the lower falls. One fact I find interesting is that when the state purchased the 79 acres in 1952 of land that included the upper falls from John Barrett for $2,000, John included a restriction in the deed that the road and parking lot must terminate 3/4 of a mile from the falls, and that visitors to the falls would have to travel on foot to preserve the natural beauty of the area. That was really forward thinking on their part for those times. Although boardwalks and steps have since been added to protect the area from the 500,000 visitors it hosts each year, the falls still looks much as it did in the early 1900s. The Barrett family also kept a 2-acre parcel of land near the upper falls for private use, which is now Camp 33. This is where the Tahquamenon Falls Brewery and Pub is now located, as well as a snack bar, souvenir shop, and other public accommodations. It is actually one of the best places locally to get food and, of course, to have a beer. We love lingering at Camp 33 for a nice break from our photography, sightseeing, and hiking the park's 50 miles of trails. This Michigan State Park is one of my favorite places to camp in Michigan. The park has 2 great camping areas. One is located at the lower falls, and the other camping area at the river mouth. The Hemlock and Portage campgrounds are 2 semi-modern campgrounds located at the lower falls. Hemlock is closer to the lower falls but also has an older campground. Portage is a little more private with more modern facilities. There are 168 sites at the lower falls with electricity only. There are even a few that have 50 amp service available. The really nice thing about Hemlock and Portage is that you can walk right out of your campsite and with a short hike be at the lower falls. You can also hike between the lower and upper falls, which is only 4 miles apart. There is even a shuttle service available most days during the peak visitor season that can drive you between the falls, so you can hike one way and ride the other way. However, make sure to inquire at the lower falls shop if the shuttle is running that day before setting out on your 4-mile hike, or it will become an 8-mile hike. I'll talk more about the hike between the falls and some of the other activities we did during our stay a little later in the video. But first, let me tell you about the other camping area at the river mouth. The river mouth has another semi-modern campground with electric hookups, as well as a rustic campground, where most of the sites sit directly on the river shore. There is also a group campground down a 2-track beyond the rustic campground, where I've stayed with scout troops previously, but it isn't on the river, although it is pretty close. The modern campground here has newer bathroom facilities, but the rustic campsite is pit toilets only. Of course, if you're staying at the rustic campground, you can still walk or drive to the modern campground to use the showers or bathroom. There is also a very nice cabin on the river for rent in the rustic campground. I love the view of the broad and deep river from the Rivermouth camping area. Boaters will often motor up the river, and some campers even bring their boats and tie them up to the shoreline. Aspen and I lingered here on the riverbank a while, enjoying the sights and sounds of the river. Stay tuned and learn more about our camping trip after this short ramble along the river. This trip we stayed at the Lower Falls camping area because we wanted electricity and to be able to simply walk out of our camper and go enjoy the Lower Falls without having to drive the car. The Lower Falls is actually a set of waterfalls around an island. It can be viewed from a set of boardwalks along the northern riverbank, or you can rent a boat and hike the small island in the center of the river. I've been here many times over the 4 decades I've been visiting the Tahquamenon Falls area, but this last trip with Aspen was the first time I actually rented a boat and crossed to the little island, and I'm glad we did because it was a lot of fun. We got there early so we could have the island to ourselves. After showing scenes from the island, we'll tell you more about our visit. Stay tuned. One day we decided to take the shuttle from the lower to the upper falls and hike 4 miles back to the lower falls. I've done this trail several times, hiking in both the upstream as well as downstream directions. I personally like starting from the upper falls because in that direction you are going downhill between the falls. However, some people prefer to start at the lower falls and hike upstream as well as uphill to the upper falls. I think they prefer to use the progress towards the spectacular upper falls as the motivation and reward for their hike, although I think it's more likely that they have an ice cream at Camp 33 or beer at the Brewery really in mind for their well-earned reward. Here are some scenes from our hike between the falls in Aspen's song Don't Go. Stay tuned to learn more about our highlights from our trip.
They say love is an open door, but if this door is just another gash, I'll close it off and walk another path. Ooh, oh, and they say love could be a war, but if this war is just another truce, I'll raise the white flag to be with you. Oh, so don't go taking my baby. Don't go taking my honeybee. I said don't go taking my baby. I said don't go. I said don't go.
This hike between the falls was one of the highlights of our camping trip here, especially the close encounter with the beaver near the end of our hike. We also walked right out of our campsite and onto the North Country Trail, which runs between the falls, along the river, and through the lower falls campgrounds before heading inland towards the river mouth. The park includes 27 miles of the North Country Scenic Trail that stretches 4,600 miles from New York to North Dakota. We hiked from the Portage Campground to Farkas Road and back through a mix of forest habitats that took us by the water tank lakes and to the top of the ridge where a forest tower once stood. Some of the trail was obviously very old and overgrown access road to the tower, and you could see where the roadbed had been cut into the hillsides to smooth out the way for vehicles. This was a remote section of trail, and we saw no other hikers during our wanderings. In fact, it isn't hard to get away from the crowds in this state park if you're willing to hike a little or launch a canoe onto the river. Enjoy the sights and sounds of the remaining of our hike, and stay tuned to see the beautiful conclusion of our Tahquamenon adventure. On the last morning of our camping trip, we had coffee and caught the sunrise at the upper falls. We only saw one couple on their way back to their car and basically had the waterfall to ourselves, which is very rare at this popular park. Although you can't really see much of the sunrise from the river gorge and falls, the light was beautiful and the experience exquisite. Aspen and I love Tahquamenon Falls and hope that you have the opportunity to visit here too. Thank you, friends, and keep wandering.